What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Now, I had to make this video as we gear up for the fight this Saturday. Adrien Broner versus Paulie, the Magic Man, Malignaggi. Really looking forward to this. I'm anxious to see basically how Broner responds at a higher weight class. Not against a huge puncher, but a very seasoned and slick fighter in Paulie Malignaggi. Paulie Malignaggi has also been in there with bigger guys, and he has proven that he can take a punch because he's never been KO'd even by those bigger guys. The Ricky Hattons when Ricky Hatton was undefeated, Amir Khan when Amir Khan was on a roll and winning and winning and winning. Someone also who has blistering hand speed, and he's been in there with Miguel Cotto's arguably in Cotto's prime. It's really hard to gauge a fighter's prime and not prime, but obviously that was at the time Malignaggi fought Cotto. Cotto was doing really well for himself in the sport. He didn't really look vulnerable. So, one thing I don't understand is the hatred towards Adrien Broner. On my channel, what I like to do is I try to give everyone a fair shake. I make my assessments. I make my opinions. I also have fighters that I like more than others, but I don't let that get in the way of my opinions. If there's a fact, a fact is a fact is a fact. And what I notice in the sport of boxing, out of all sports, I think boxing has some of the most biased fans, like fans that are easily willing to overlook certain facts to prove a point, or because they don't like a fighter's personal life or their personality, they're willing to go to great lengths to demean them and basically belittle them or discredit them. I don't understand why the constant hate for Adrien Broner. I think he's a young, budding talent who shows that he has skill, especially at a young age. So for that reason, I feel you have to give fighters like that props. He has a big mouth, but at the same time, no one to this point has been able to shut it. And we will see what Paulie Malignaggi, being a veteran, can do coming up this week. I did a video about Broner. He said he's open to the idea of facing Marcos Maidana. Now, I'm seeing a lot of things online, and it's like a mixed bag. Some people are for the fight, some people are against it. The complaints with Broner that I'm really hearing is obviously the Ponce de Leon. People are willing to, when you exercise a level of greatness or talent, I feel like people will take your toughest fight or anything they can do to discredit you. Obviously, everyone knows he had a tough time with Daniel Ponce de Leon, and people use that against him as far as why he sucks now because he should have lost to Ponce de Leon or whatever the situation is. But you can't deny and let your eyes deceive you. I mean, the kid is getting better and better and better, and he seems to be growing with the sport and improving as he gets older. And it's fights like Daniel Ponce de Leon, fights like that, I think are going to make a fighter better, whether they win or lose, because Ponce de Leon's a tough customer. I think Abner Mares himself gained valuable experience fighting him, even though Abner Mares did exceptionally well, better than I thought. I thought Abner Mares would win if you check my prediction video, but he actually looked better than I expected him to because it was a new weight class. I expected more of an uphill battle. But it's fights like that that really, you put the experience in the bank and it makes you the fighter that you are. Even Paulie Malignaggi taking on someone like Cotto when Cotto was looking really vicious, that's valuable experience. Even though Paulie Malignaggi lost to Cotto, he was in there with somebody who was very fierce and ferocious and hungry. So with Broner, I don't see why it's so much constant hate. Like, in relation to the Marcos Maidana fight, I would like to see the fight. If Broner does stick around at welterweight, it's a good fight. Marcos Maidana, another tough customer where he's not going to just lie down for you. I mean, the dude has a chin, and he has the equalizer. So he has punching power, and that's evident by his KO ratio and what he does in there. I mean, he has the power to hurt anybody, so he's not the type of fighter. He doesn't look shot. He actually looks like he's improving and going from more of a brawler to a better, well-rounded fighter. I'm not saying he had him a Rigondeaux or something, but he's showing more boxing agility with Robert Garcia in his corner. He's exercising a jab. He's more economical with his punches than I've seen him before. Like if you were to watch his fight with Josecito Lopez versus his fight with Amir Khan, Amir Khan, he had Khan in severe trouble, and it looked like he gassed himself out, wasn't really conditioned um, to keep throwing punches. So he had Khan hurt, and he wasn't able to capitalize or get Khan out of there because he tired himself out and punched himself out. But in the Josecito, he stayed a lot more composed and a lot more patient, and he weathered the storm because Josecito hit him on his thigh or leg or some shit, and he said his leg went numb and he was in pain, and he was able to deal with that adversity. But as far as Adrien Broner, I just want to take some time to look at the potential matchup, and I don't understand why people are so quick to discredit Adrien Broner, but fighters like Marcos Maidana, who is an action fighter, and this video is not to slander Marcos Maidana, because out of the brawlers or heavy punchers, he's one of the fighters I really like. Again, he's a tough customer, he has a chin, and he comes to fight, and his resume is solid. He's been, whether he's won or lost, he's been in there with Eric Morales's, Amir Khan's, he's been in there with the Devin Alexanders. I mean, this guy is obviously game. The Victor Ortiz's, he's willing to fight anybody. But when you really break it down, some of the complaints that people have with Broner and why people are praising Marcos Maidana, sometimes it doesn't really add up. And again, I understand Marcos Maidana is a no bullshit, straightforward. You know what you're gonna get from a Marcos Maidana fight. But it's boxing. There's different styles to it, and I just want to break down some facts. Again, I'm not the type to overlook facts. So, as far as Adrien Broner and Marcos Maidana, first things first, Adrien Broner has a slightly higher KO ratio than Marcos Maidana. Broner is somewhere at 84%, and Marcos Maidana is at 83%. And keep in mind, Marcos Maidana does have a few more fights than Broner, but both of them have a high KO ratio over 80%, and Broner's actually, his KO ratio is a little bit higher. Then I'm hearing complaints that Broner fights undersized people, like people much smaller than himself, etc., etc. Now, he moves up 2 weight classes to fight Paulie Malignaggi, and that's not good enough. And if you know anything about the sport of boxing, even though Paulie Malignaggi is not the biggest puncher, he's already been in there with guys who are naturally probably bigger than Broner and had been fighting at higher weights than Broner. So you never know how that weight will affect Broner. In my prediction video, I do have Broner still stopping Paulie Malignaggi, but it is a huge gamble jumping up 2 weight classes. That's not something that's easy to do. I mean, even the Manny Pacquiao, who's heralded as the greatest fighter, the fighter of the decade, when he fought Margarito, it was a different ball game than when he's fighting the Diaz's of the world. What he was able to do with David Diaz versus Margarito, a little bit different. Even though he fought Margarito up too, it's the weight plays a significant part. And Margarito is super slow. Paulie Malignaggi is known for being a slick fighter and pretty fast himself. So I'm anxious to see how it'll look. So if you're complaining that he's fighting undersized midgets like Gavin Reese or whatever you want to say, then how can you be afraid or mad at this fight, Malignaggi? Even though he's not the biggest puncher, he's still fighting someone who actually beats him in statistical categories or has been fighting at a higher weight with bigger guys. Other thing, Marcos Maidana, people look at Marcos Maidana and they just love him. And I love Marcos Maidana, but when you also look at certain boxing is a sport of where what have you done for me lately type of thing. And if you really look at the recent resume of Marcos Maidana and the trends, and you look at Adrien Broner, and it's funny because some people hate Broner so much they'll discredit him and say, oh, he hasn't fought nobody, his resume sucks, and he's getting spoon-fed, cherry-picked opponents, etc., etc., etc. Basically, everything people say about Mayweather, they could easily cross Mayweather's name off and put Adrien Broner from the people that don't like either. And there's a lot of people that don't like both. But if you really dive into the facts, which I'm going to do, you'll notice some things that it'll make you question your decision. Like, again, Marcos Maidana does have a solid resume, but he also has names on his resume and gets credit for fights that he's supposed to win. So, Josecito Lopez, that was a great fight. However, if you really analyze it, Josecito Lopez went up in weight to fight Canelo, and he lost. So Josecito is coming off a loss, even though Josecito is a tough customer, a game opponent. Before that, Josecito Lopez fought Victor Ortiz and was down on the scorecards and was able to win by breaking Ortiz's jaw because Ortiz had his mouth open. But that was a very rough and tumble tug of war type fight where Ortiz was ahead on all three judges' scorecards. So it was a tough fight. Before that, Josecito fought Jesse Vargas and lost that fight. So even though Josecito Lopez is a tough customer, he's a game fighter, he's a fighter I respect, a fighter I like. I mean, this guy hasn't necessarily been on a win streak. And in addition to that, he's bounced up in weight from 140 to 147, move up to 154, and then back to 147. So his weight has fluctuated. But Marcos Maidana will get all the credit in the world for beating him, even though Marcos Maidana had more fights at 147. Yet Broner won't get credit. Keep looking at Marcos Maidana. Before the Josecito fight, Marcos Maidana fought Angel Martinez in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So one, Maidana is from Argentina, so he clearly has a hometown advantage. And if you look at Angel Martinez, that's a fighter who has lost 3 or 4 of his previous fights right before he fought Maidana. 3 out of 4. And they were all by KO or TKO stoppage. And in the 4th fight that Martinez fought, it was a draw. So Marcos Maidana fought someone at home who lost 3 out of 4 of their fights right before fighting Marcos Maidana. And then the 4th fight was a draw. So Angel Martinez has not looked spectacular before getting in the ring with Marcos Maidana, and then he got in the ring with the big puncher with the hometown advantage and lost. So Marcos Maidana, again, gets credit for a fight with Angel Martinez, someone who hasn't looked spectacular. Look before that, Marcos Maidana fought Jesus Soto Caras. Now, Caras is a seasoned veteran, and he has a granite chin. I don't take that away. And he's another one of those type of fighters like the Ponce de Leons or Orlando Salidos who's a tough son of a bitch and comes to bring it and can pose problems for anyone because he's that Margarito type where he's a stalker and he has a chin and he can take big shots. Marcos Maidana had a tough fight with Jesus Soto Caras. It was definitely an action-packed affair on the Canelo Josecito undercard. But look deeper into Soto Caras's record, and before Soto fought Marcos Maidana, he lost 4 out of 7 of his previous fights, and then one was a no contest. So he hasn't looked spectacular in his recent fights. And then he did have 2 wins in there because, I told you he had 7 fights, lost 4. One was a no contest, so that's 5 fights. So the other 2 fights were against non-ranked opponents, aka bums. He fought El Harak and Yuri Gonzalez. And if you guys know anything about the sport of boxing, you'll know that Gonzalez had already been stopped by Canelo 3 years before he fought Soto Caras. And Canelo at the time, I believe he was like 19 years old. So Gonzalez wasn't doing good. So basically, Marcos Maidana fought Jesus Soto Caras, who lost 4 fights. He had a no contest in one, and then he beat 2 guys, one of which was already stopped by a 19-year-old Canelo. So Marcos Maidana beating Soto Caras, it's a good name. It's a name that most diehard boxing fans know. But again, how much credit can you give him for beating a guy who has not really looked exceptional in their previous 7 affairs, 7 fights? Before that, Marcos Maidana lost to Devin Alexander convincingly, in my opinion. Some people said Alexander held too much, etc., etc., etc. But at the same time, Marcos Maidana has an equalizer. He just didn't really know what to do and got outboxed and outslicked. So I don't understand why people are so critical on Broner. Every single move he makes, he has a higher KO ratio than Marcos Maidana. His opponents have been on more of a win streak than Marcos Maidana's opponents of recent memory. But people love Marcos Maidana, but they hate Broner. So it just lets me know there's a little bit more to it. Either that or fans don't really know what they're talking about. They don't really know the sport. They don't really dive into the records. They only know what they see. Again, this is not to bash Marcos Maidana. As a whole, in its entirety, Marcos Maidana has an excellent resume with tough names, whether he won or lost. He has those names on his resume, and he's a fighter that brings it each and every time. I have no beef with Marcos Maidana. My only beef is with the fans that don't really know the sport, who are quick to criticize one person, and little do they know they're in love or they favor another fighter, and that fighter could be criticized for the same exact thing they're criticizing the fighter they hate for. And that's my whole point to this video. Let me know what you guys think. Me personally, I would really love to see Marcos Maidana versus Adrien Broner. Again, Maidana has been improving, and he's a big dude with the chin, so I'd be anxious to see what would happen. But when you go skill for skill, bar for bar, line for line, I think Marcos Maidana doesn't have as many tools in the tool shed as Adrien Broner. But again, he does have an equalizer, and he's a determined fighter. So I would like to see the fight. I would still favor Broner in that fight. I just don't really understand why some fans are quick to criticize Broner's selection of opponents and criticize his wins, like Gavin Reese. They criticize Gavin Reese. That's a former world champion, and he was on a win streak, and I think he only lost one time. And as you've seen in the first 2 rounds, Gavin Reese was definitely game. It looked like he had a solid game plan, and then rounds 3, 4, and 5, his game plan against Broner started to go away. And I think Broner may have underestimated Gavin Reese, and he took some shots and realized that he actually had to turn it up and take it to another level. But again, I don't see why people are so eager to criticize fighters like Broner and their selection, their resume, their skill, but they give guys like Marcos Maidana all the credit in the world. So let me know what you guys think of this topic. As always, hate, comment, or subscribe. Till next video, it's Ego signing off. This being a good match, if you know anything about the sport of boxing, you will know that contrast in styles can be everything. Styles make fights. So if Broner has a soft chin, Maidana definitely has the equalizer for it.